Welcome to the Career Cafe, a place where teenagers ask experts. Today, we will be discussing psychology as a career with our expert over some chocolate cake. We will cover the details of a psychology major and how to identify if you are a suitable student for it. We will also look into the different careers available through this degree, focusing into human resource, business management, industrial psychology, and research in this episode. I am your host, Ananya Nipane, for the psychology episode, and I look forward to asking your questions to our expert. Today, I have invited Ashwini Bhave as our psychology expert, and she is a certified coach at Marshall Goldsmith Stakeholder Centered Coaching. She is a psychometric assessment assessor and optimizer, psychologist, trainer, and columnist. And we look forward to discussing your questions with her. First of all, I'm very glad that you were able to join us today. To quickly start with, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to interact with youngsters and being able to address any queries that you have.
Sure. That's again pretty amazing because I bet me and even the listeners, we all are really excited to have you on board and get our answers from you. So as you might know that through a survey, we had a survey in our community, in our high school community, and we collected some very intriguing questions. And with that, I think one of the most intriguing questions, and I would say something that we should actually start with, should
Okay.
be should is that how do we know that psychology is a good career or a major for one person? Like, what type of learners or what type of students does this major or career expect? And moreover, what should a learner expect from a major or career? So that, later on we don't regret taking this major because we didn't expect that this would happen in the, career or major.
Sure. So I understand psychology is absolutely a very interesting subject to learn and know about, but it is not an easy subject to practice. So it is very interesting to know about a human, the behavior, what they think, what's happening, but it is equally difficult to practice. So if you are one, I would always encourage, especially people students who want to take psychology, that get an assessment done because it looks interesting, but not necessarily is interesting to practice. So you need to know whether you have that trait to be a psychologist or is it a hobby. So we can differentiate whether psychology can be our hobby or it can be our career. So my thing is, how do you learn? And there is no better way to learn because what we learn is all our perception. We need an objective way to figure out whether that's a career which we are built for. And therefore, I definitely for everybody recommend taking an assessment because it gives us at least a thought process to see what are the challenges that might come, how long can we take this subject, or we learn it as a basis to get somewhere else. So if you can take psychology, but you know that you want to do probably an HR, then psychology would help because then you will not practice psychology, but it is going to learn psychology. So there are two different things. So one, of course, is an assessment. And second is there are some peculiar characteristics that you will, as a psychologist, should be ingrained or they should be your natural behavior. So one is compassion or being empathetic. That's extremely important. Second is a good communication skill. So when I'm saying communication more as a psychologist, you have to have good listening skills. You have to have good observation skills. That's important. Then you have to be a problem solver because everybody who's coming to you is coming with a problem. They are not coming to you when they are happy. They are coming to you when they are sad, when they are not functional, when they need some support, when they need somebody that they can talk to. So you need to have that problem solving attitude. Then the extremely most important thing for a psychologist is to be emotionally stable. They need to be emotionally stable.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will translate some of your emotional instability to a person who is already emotionally unstable.
Yeah.
So you need to be emotionally stable. You have to have an analytical mind. That's important because all the time when this person is talking and you're listening, all the time you're continuously analyzing the situation. What's happening? What can be the surrounding? What could be the trigger? So you are always analyzing the situation. And of course, then you would have some organizational skills. You should have a ability to connect with them. You should have an ability to pick up social clues. So these are important characteristics for a psychologist. That's important.
And like you spoke about assessments. So like could you
Hmm.
go into a bit of detailing into like what are certain assessments that I as a student or someone else as a student could take?
So when I'm saying assessments, see there are a lot of assessments in the market. Career counselors are there, but my only suggestion or recommendation to anybody who is willing to take an assessment, there are two important questions that you need to ask. Any assessments that you, what is the reliability of that assessment?
Mm-hmm.
And that's important because there will be tons and tons of assessments in the market,
Yeah.
ranging at different price range, but the reliability nobody talks about. Most of the assessments would talk about this is a valid instrument. Like people would take, say, a personality assessment um, and use that for careers, but those assessments are not built for career counseling. They are not built for assessing careers. So you have to ask this question: is this built to map careers? Is this assessment reliable? What is the reliable count? And most of they will say about 5, 6, 7. Those are not good enough. You have to look at an assessment which is more than zero point 0.8, because you can't have a 100% hit rate for assessments, but 8.3, 8.2, 8.5 is a good reliability quotient.
Okay.
Then the next question is validity. Is this assessment valid for a career test? So these are
Solving your
few questions that you need to ask. Nobody talks about reliability. Most would talk about validity, and you have to ask whether these assessments are made to test career choices, or they are made to test something else, and you're using them to career choices. These are few questions that need to be asked, and if the answer is yes to all of it, then please go ahead and use them.
True. So you actually spoke about different traits about as a psychologist. But now there's another thing that comes here is that everyone has a niche in certain types of studies, right? Like let's say for example, I consider myself more of a creative type of a learner, whereas some people like to be analytical and like get into focused into science, whereas I would be
Right.
more interested into the arts type. So similarly, when one goes on the internet and start searching about different psychology degrees or majors, they have a lot of you can see two options coming up. That is a BSc, that is a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. So it's, as a student myself, I get really confused between what's the difference between the both, and how do I know which one suits better for me?
See, as I said, whether it suits, first we need to understand ourselves, and we spend, I think, our lifelong understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
So that is a difficult question to answer if we don't have an objective third-person assessment view that this is what you are. You can at least say yes and no to a lot of extent. So that is important, but so that is one challenge that we will have to look at in terms of how do you want to cross that. But the second is whether I choose BA or whether I choose BSc. Technically, there is not really too much of difference in terms of the syllabus as such. The focus can be different, but syllabus tend to be similar, if not the same. But the approach is different. BA psychology is from a liberal arts perspective,
Okay.
right? It will focus on theories. There is not too much of a scientific practicality to the theories, that you're not experimenting those. There is no approach uh, specifically concentrated to biology. There is no approach specifically concentrated to maths. But science, BSc Science will have more concentration on, say, the biological aspects of human mind, the mathematical connotations to the analysis, the statistical implications to them. There will be lot more practical approach to that. BSc Psychology also gives you a more research oriented approach towards psychology. So it's while BA Psychology will give you from a very liberal arts perspective the knowledge of psychology, the theories of psychology, and then how do you practice um, those theories. So that is the slight differentiation. So if anybody has a very research bent of mind, then BSc Psychology is a good I mean, taking BSc is a good suggestion, because then you're focusing on research methodology. Of course, research methodology is taught in BA Psychology also, but the focus is not there as much as it is there in the BSc Psychology.
It's difference of weightage, basically, in the
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Like, what are
and especially if you're going to use forensic psychology, or if you're going to use clinical psychology, if you want to be a clinical practitioner, clinical psychologist, or you want to be a forensic psychologist, then BSc is more suited, because that aspects are not taught, because for forensic you will have to learn biology. There's no way you will have to look at chemistry as a subject. Those are important subjects for forensic psychology. That will definitely not get catered in BA Psychology. If you want to be, say, an industrial psychologist, then of course BA Psychology works well. Or even if you want to be a counselor, BA Psychology still works well. Then you can use subjects like sociology or political science or philosophy as a minor subjects in BA. So that can be done.
So, I mean, considering that there are two very different focuses of like psychology is known as a subject where you can have sciences and liberal arts and humanities which can be combined. So obviously, when you look at psychology as a career, I bet there are many career options available as a student. And I think through the survey we received a lot of questions. I think like students are genuinely confused about this fact that what can I do with a psychology degree? So could you elaborate something on, what are the different career fields that are available through a psychology degree? And I think there were two very specific questions on, what is the advantage of having a psych degree in human resource management and business management? Because we usually hear that psychology degrees are valuable in such cases, but the students really want to know that, can these fields be done without a psych degree? Or do we have an advantage if we have one?
Okay. So I'll first answer the first question, what can you do with psychology? So like any other subjects that you would take, there is a core strength of that particular career that you want to do. So the logical thing is, when you take psychology, you either can be a psychologist, you can be a clinical psychologist, you can be a forensic psychologist, you can be a child psychologist, you can be an industrial psychologist. And you can work in hospitals if you've taken clinical psychology. So if somebody who's not been able to clear MBBS but likes that environment, wants to be in that environment, clinical psychology is a good idea, because then you get that environment to work in. Besides that, you can work as a social worker. So you can do that. You can also then look at journalism, political science, education. So anything after BA, if you are looking at any post-graduation degree, which has more in terms of human connection. So today, even for commerce subjects, you will have psychology introduced even for, say, commerce, which was not earlier done, because today you feel that you need to know human behavior to make any strategy as a business strategy also. Learning psychology is a good idea to have one say subject as psychology, if you don't want to be a psychologist.
So either as a minor in your undergraduation, even that would work. It's not necessary
minor
as a major, particularly.
So if you want to be a psychologist, then major is needed. But if you want to take, say, business administration, or you are focused on any other career, then and which is related to human, so it is not IT, but even for IT, human interaction, human behavior is important, how people use it for consumerism, understanding basis of a little bit of psychology. So minor psychology subject is a great idea to have, but for a major, I think it should be important that you're committed to use psychology in as a career.
And
Yeah,
post-grad as well.
yes, as a post graduation, then you will enjoy it.
Okay.
And if you, even if you're taking HR, then I would HR. Then I would still suggest that psychology is a good idea with, say, a minor in economics or minor in international studies or whatever you want to really, or any other subject. For them, it is good because end of the day, their whole area is about human resources and how do you utilize it. So a little background on human resources through psychology will help. But eventually, if I don't make that choice today and I still want to do business administration or I do want to use in HR, it is not mandatory to have it.
Okay.
It may benefit to a certain extent, but definitely not mandatory.
Okay. And there is this also field that you spoke about, which is industrial psychology, or even like I started hearing nowadays this term known as consumer behavior. So
Right.
how would you say that these two fields, what type of an industry it is, and is it growing in these sudden times, and like would it be recommended that through a psychology degree one gets into these fields?
See, for consumer behavior, not necessarily all the time you need a professional psychology degree. But for industrial or organizational psychology, yes, you will need. So it is another way to learn through. So we are doing MBA in human resources. It is another degree, a master degree who concentrates on organization through psychology. So it is similar, if not totally different. The layering, the focus may be different, but you can have an MBA in human resources, or you can have an MA in or MBA, MSc in industrial psychology, and that works. You can still get into a organizational workforce from that aspect. So, so, but in MBA, you have other subjects that kind of will give you a little more aspects of business management.
Okay,
So that's the only difference.
so a
Whereas psychology,
student who's focusing into going into HR but is more interested into, let's say, the psychology part rather than the business administration, then that student would be recommended having a MA or MSc in industrial psychology, rather the student interested in business would have a normal MBA degree.
Okay. Yes. So if you are very sure that that's the stream, then organizational psychology is great to study.
Okay, so like that becomes like one part of psychology. It becomes the industrial counseling part of psychology. But even me, I'm not that interested into psychology as a counseling, but I am interested into it through research. So obviously, these questions do come up that, what is the scope of research in psychology? Because when you hear the word research, your mind just directly goes to PCM or like PCB or something like that. And a follow-up question on that also, which you could answer, could be that, what type of locations and environments is like the best for field research in psychology? And, which nations or which countries, or like what is the scope particularly in India about this?
So let's look at research. Yes, there is plenty of opportunities for research psychology, because initially, if you look at till now, till recent times, we didn't want to go to a counselor because there was a connotation associated, a negative connotation associated with psychology. Now people are more and more okay to say that I go to a psychologist. And my experience is that if I'm talking to a 25, 26-year who's just newly joined organization, they are absolutely okay saying that I am going and meeting a psychologist. While the older generation will be still resistant to say, but they will still go, but they're not openly declaring it.
Like a taboo attached to mental health, something like that. Yeah.
So now, because of that, there is research happening. Initially, it was just happening outside. Now it has also started happening in India, and you have hospitals, you have other institutions which are involving research field in psychology. So the scope, of course, is for your generation. It will grow till the time you are out of your um, from your degree courses. So research field is growing. Now you can look at more or less three types of research that we have. We have a descriptive research where you're measuring behaviors and attributes through either observations or experiments. You have correlation research where you are relating between two variables. It could be behavior or situations, anything. And you would have experimental research. Now, the first two are more done. Experimental research is basically you are testing your hypothesis and you're trying to establish a cause-effect relationship. So that may not be really very, it's not been used too much, but descriptive and correlation research have been, there are various researches that are happening through those modalities. Now, when you're looking at what type of situations or surrounding, it totally depends on what are you researching.
Yeah, true.
Are you going to be directly observing? So if you're directly observing, then you have to go and be at that situation. So if it is a mental hospital, you have to go to the mental hospital. If you're testing students who are differently able, you'll have to be in those situations. If you are testing some, say, less privileged people, you have to go and be there. If you're testing old age, some study that you're doing on old age, you'll have to be with old age people or be in an old age home. So where you can do is very difficult to answer because all that depends on what type of it, whether it's directive research or whether it is a participative research where you want people to participate in it, or whether it is say ethnography research where you want a social research or a social perspective or a cultural perspective to have. So you will have to be there. Or the quantitative interviews that we do. A lot of research happens through interviewing. So are you practicing that? So it depends on your research, your subject of research. That will depend your location, the people that you interact with, the situations that you will be in. So it may not. It also there needs a lot of field work because it is not a database research. You will have to have a lot of data, so you will have to get on field.
Yeah.
And gathering data, I think for any research is the key and is important and difficult at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a good sample size. And for that you will have to be on the field. And there are not every time there are comforting surroundings. Sometimes it is uncomfortable, it can be risky, but it depends on your topic.
I mean, that's also another beauty of psychology, right? You also have data there, but you also have to, observe your observations, your pure observations there, and just yeah, and like that, just to mix, like when they both mix up, you really do get a lot of answers, but at the same time, I bet you get more questions to later ponder on, and
yes.
Yeah, and like psychology, I think personally, I believe that the beauty of psychology relies in the fact that we have theories. We really can't prove anything because we don't know what the human brain actually works like. We can just hypothesize and find out different solutions through whatever we observe, but we can't state that yes, this happens because there's always more to look upon.
To some extent, that's true, but there are some basic hypotheses and a basic testing that you do to prove your hypothesis, and through that you can make a statement that this will lead to this. Of course, there will be few surprise elements. So it will not be like pure math. That that 1 plus 1 will have to be 2. There is no other option.
Yeah.
But for psychology, sometimes those are some restrictions, but there is enough research work. There are enough testings that are happening. So like I said, assessment. We are saying that 0.8 and above assessment rate, reliability rate is good. We're not saying 100. But till that assessment, that research, for research also it's the same thing. That it will be to a limited extent, but doesn't mean that you don't research in that field. There are opportunities, and the more data you have, the more concrete your hypothesis or the testing happens.
So, like in a follow up question to this, there was another question that we collected, which is on the tendency of variables to be uncontrollable in psychological environments, right? Because when you look upon scientific experiments, there are certain like it's not obvious that it's not always that all variables you have can be controlled. Obviously, there is like air pressure or certain things like that that can't be controlled. However, in psychology, there are so many subjective variables that you have no idea of. So how does a psychologist actually work with this? That having so much subjectivity in their research.
No, so there is subjectivity, but the point is when you are researching, you are looking at 2 or 3 measurable things. So you're not looking at all the variables. You will look at variables which are still where you can club them and say, okay, under these variables, these are still the similarities. So you will focus on one area. So the other variables don't matter. And end of the day, it also depends on what research you are doing. So I understand it is not like the mathematical, physics or biology research that will go. But still, when you are researching, there are few variants that you will choose, and you will choose your population accordingly. So for psychology research, the population also matters.
Yeah.
What are you looking at? And it may be a little difficult in terms of other more scientific approach or science related topics, but you still there is not so much of variance that happens that your research goes for a toss. You can still, I mean, there will be some challenges, but you can still have a good concrete research material that you can publish using research methodology. And the research methodology helps you also to look at those variants. What are the constraints? How can you overcome? So there's a full subject called research methodology, both in BSc as well BA, that will train you to conduct a research. So these questions then don't create challenges when you're kind of researching. So it's well taken care while you're studying psychology. How do you minimize the risk?
I think, personally for me, this factor of subjectivity and these challenges is something that I really look forward to. And I think because I am interested in the research part of the psychology, that is something that I look forward to. However, other students who are into counseling and all, who are interested into that, I think it's the human part of interacting with humans, solving their problems is something that they are interested into. But I think in overall, psychology as a degree that I would summarize as would be, it is open to different kind of people. It's just that you need to be able to understand what a human is, and you need to be able to interact with them, and also, be mentally strong yourself. And I think psychology otherwise can work and, delve into all the other fields that are available in our situation.
Absolutely.
And first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure that all of our listeners, were able to get answers to some of their questions. And we really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, if you have anything, something last to
It's
say.
been my pleasure. I'm so thankful that you approached and I could join. So thank you so much for inviting. And for all the students who are interested in psychology, it's a great area to work in if you're really interested. And there are multiple opportunities. So whether you are interested in being a psychologist or not, I think it's also an important minor subject to take.
Yeah.
Because at end of the day, you're interacting with humans. So if you have some insights into it, it will help you in your careers as well. And also it will help you in terms of emotionally actually being able to help you, knowing yourself better, because it teaches you to know yourself also, in understanding yourself also. So a minor psychology subject is great to have, even if you're not going to be a psychologist. So that's the only take that I have. And anybody who wants, and if you have any questions, feel free to write to me. If there are any particular questions that you require related to psychology. And my only suggestion for students who want to take psychology, in the college you will be learning more of Western psychology. But please, there are very few colleges in India who started Indian psychology. But please make an effort to also learn Indian psychology, because the West world is looking at India for Indian psychology. And they're using our practices and building and doing research in their own way. Like you would have the Harvard starting a happiness course. And most of the happiness course material is from Indian psychology. So look at courses available for Indian psychology as well if you are going to be a practicing psychologist. So that will also help you in your career as well. So that's my
I think I personally will check out all of this and, finalize my undergraduation accordingly. And I'm sure the other students will also do so. Thank you so much again. And I hope that, this, all of your answers was able to help someone, one of our listeners.
Sure.
I hope that this episode has helped you clear some of your doubts concerning psychology. As for the next episode, we will be inviting a biotechnology expert over for a croissant. If that is something you're interested in, we hope to see you back at Career Cafe. Until then, please do leave your reviews and share this podcast. And to learn more, please follow us on our Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook page. We would love to know more about our listeners.